Can you let me in?
Yeah, I'm getting, you're in. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, are you there now?
Yeah, let me see. It says no, stop the video.
It said what?
Can't start your video because the host has stopped it.
Okay, we're back to that problem that I don't know that I had last week. I don't know what's making it do that.
Let me see if I can find out. Okay, let's see. Make sure all other programs. Okay, let's see. Managing participants in a meeting. The article covers controls for host and co-host. Manage participants in the host controls to display the participant list. So do you see where the host controls are?
No, I don't.
You might have to go back. You might have to log in.
Log out and back in.
No, just go to Safari or somewhere and log into your Zoom account. Or let's see, you see the participant list on the side when you click on participants?
I pulled up the participants list. I'm looking at it and it says that there are some participants already in. There are
I think
5
what you
participants.
can do, you see, okay, you see that little thing up there in the chat?
Up in the chat, what's in the chat?
Uh-huh. Go over to the chat. When you hit the chat, you see the little chat thing from the side, on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Okay, you see that little carrot up there?
Nope, I see.
No, you see that, you see chat. You see where chat is written at the top?
Yeah.
You see that thing to the left?
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay, click on that. It says pop out.
Okay, I did.
Okay, so I think it says draw on the pop out to separate participants list from the meeting window. So what you can do, hover over a participant and then click more for these options.
I'm hovering over you, which is the only participant that's showing up right now.
Okay, and then make co-host.
Okay, make host. I made you the host.
No, you should make me co-host.
There's no option for co-host. I can't do that.
Okay.
There's no such option.
Okay.
Okay.
Did you do that already?
Just did it. So maybe you can do it now.
All right.
There you are. You just showed up. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I need to figure out, because other panelists aren't here, even though they were going to be late. I need to figure out if they're coming in. And I'm quite surprised because by this time we should have a lot more participants in my participant frame.
Well, no, it's 122.
Okay.
Open the chat window to send messages directly. Stop the participants' video stream so they are unable to start their video if the participation hasn't started their video yet. But you're doing webinar, right?
Yeah, we're doing the webinar.
Okay. All right, so good. So we know how to do that.
Okay, I'm going to go back to trying to make it go live. It said it was go live was preparing.
Who's managing the chat?
Wanda generally does. And you know something? I don't know if I gave her the panelists. I better do that now. Let me do that right now.
I'm in my black pearl green with my black pearls right here. See this?
All right. Okay. Hold on. Let me see.
Oh, there is no groundwater tomorrow, so we're all off.
Oh, okay. Do you happen to know Wanda's email by heart?
Yeah, which one? The REI
W.
one?
Green.
Hold on. You're talking about at Gmail. Okay, she has a REI one too, but let me see. You got it?
No.
It's Legrand dot, oh, that's Legrand dot Wanda at Outlook. Hold on.
Hold on. I'm looking for it too.
The thing is Wanda Legrand at gmail.com.
Okay. It's Legrand.Wanda. Okay. I'm just kind of concerned that none of our other panelists are here yet.
Hi.
Oh, somebody's
Oh,
here. There's Liza. Yay.
Monica, if you can hear me, it says I'm unable to start video. I don't know if I'm turned off.
Dina's going to try to figure that out. We can't figure out. I see Emily's just joined too. Dina, can you?
We're all hopping off the other call, so we should all be joining momentarily. It's
And we're
Oh, beautiful women. I'm trying to get the
Hey.
camera to work.
Hey, Emily, that's what we're trying to figure out why it's not working for you. We have no
Says the
idea.
host has stopped it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Emily, I'm not on either. Dina's trying to figure it out.
Shoot.
That's okay. You don't need to see my face. Like I'm
Wanda-
a little ragged.
Okay. So Monica, where did I tell you to go? In the chat?
You told me to go over to the chat, to the carrot in the chat.
Change role to attendee. Attendee. You're not an attendee. If I make you host, it's like it's telling me I can make people host, but not. Let's
I'm
see.
gonna text Kelly because she's been playing this role for us. Maybe she can give you a tip.
Okay.
She was supposed to be coming on, by the way, right?
She is, yeah, of course things were going long. So we were telling Sean to wrap it up and then everybody was gonna jump off.
Okay, see if that'll work. It said allow panelists to start video.
Yeah, yay. Now that's great. Thank you,
Problem solved.
Dina. There's Wanda. Wanda, make sure you're take care of the chat. You there? Wanda's gonna monitor our chat. Everybody, this is
Hello,
Wanda
everyone.
Legrand. Hey there.
Hey, Wanda.
Hello. What's the temperature in New Orleans?
It's what?
It's humid.
Humid. No temperature, just humid. Oh, okay, fantastic. That's not the worst thing that could happen.
Like walking through a shower outside.
Well, it's actually very warm here today. I don't know about the humidity. We've been out in it, Wanda? Dina?
Just to walk my dogs a little bit. Not as bad as New Orleans in June.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah. Well, how you guys been, New Orleans?
Good. One foot in front of the other.
I have no idea. I was trying to make us go Facebook Live. I don't know if we achieved that or not, but I did the best I could. I give up on it. If it didn't work this week, it won't work.
I think it's giving me the option to do that. Let's
Well,
see.
please take care of that option.
All right, here we go.
Thank you, Rainey. We miss you too. I miss seeing you. Well, Rainey Lynn has just dropped something in the chat all the way from Redondo Beach, California. Absolutely. So how did the naked lunch go, ladies?
It's still going on.
Oh, okay. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I thought it's supposed to wrap up in 1 minute, so we'll see. I thought Alan and Andrea were going to drop off with Emily and me, and then
Okay.
Don and Kelly are going right at the end. So we
Okay.
here.
Well, we sure miss our monthly visit to New Orleans.
We miss
We
having
miss
you.
you too. And we have a lot of, especially in the last few weeks, I've gotten a lot of outreach. So when you guys decide that you might turn your attention to travel again, let us know. I
Right.
think we've got a
Absolutely.
lot of demand building.
Yeah.
Some of us are ready to travel now. We're just going to wear a mask and just kind of dive in.
We're gonna have to get you an RV or a bus or something. Go on tour.
A tour bus. That's right.
Yeah, because
I hate riding.
I miss
Yeah.
some of that good New Orleans food.
All right, we're ready. We're ready.
Okay. You know what I'll do, Dina, which might make sense in order to give the other panelists time to click in,
Yes,
is to open up by talking about, this,
please do.
which I typically do. So I see that there are those of you that are checking in. It's wonderful to have so many of you back again with us today. Those of you, I see Suzanne Bundy all the way from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We had Rainey Lynn in from Redondo Beach, California. I see some folks that I can say where you are by name, but I'm Monica Walker. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Dina Hayes. We are both a part of the Black Pearls Society Incorporated, which is an organization she and I founded, and we are both very much a part of the Racial Equity Institute. I would like to invite all of you, simply because of the time it would take to really give you a comprehensive view and understanding of both organizations, that you can go on both websites. The Racial Equity Institute can be found at www.racialequityinstitute.org and .com. You can find the blackpearlsociety.org, www.blackpearlsociety.org. I will say this much about the Black Pearls. Wanda, who is going to be minding the chat, is one of our members. We have members who are going to be checking in, but we are all Black women. We're Black women who have made a very intentional decision to represent race in all that we do, in our public and private lives, in our professions, in everything that we do, because we think it is important. I think the events and the incidents of the last 7 days certainly helped to lift that up. And we think that our work has been helping not only people to understand strategic and institutional racism, but Dina is often quoted as saying, it is the analysis and a way of living with that understanding. It's a way of life. It's not about how we incorporate it into an understanding of how we work, but it is the way we live. With that said, the other couple of things that I want to say is that we're inviting you to drop your questions, curiosities, and everything, that as we interact and engage with our panelists today, that you'll drop your questions in the chat. We have someone mining that chat, and we're going to try to get to as many questions as we can. But we have a rich display of panelists representing the great city of New Orleans, a place very near to my heart and near to the place that I was born and raised. And so we're glad to have them with us here today. I don't know any other formalities to offer. I know that Sean and Kelly should probably be dropping in any minute now, or are they here already? Maybe I'm not looking.
John, Kelly, and Andrea will all be joining us.
Okay. All right. So maybe we can, Dina, I'm going to throw that first question, which is about introduction, to you.
Yeah, so we have a rock star panel today, and for our viewers and attendees, if we could have you introduce yourself so people can learn about who you are and the amazing work that you were doing before you got into, being the organizer supreme in the campaign that you started. So I'm gonna just ask you, point you each to introduce yourself as you're lined up on my screen so that we can move swiftly through this. And I'll start, Emily, you're first here because I think you and Liza signed on early. So will you introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you do in your life?
Sure, the early bird gets the worm, I guess. Well, thank you so much for joining or inviting us. I'm thrilled to be here. My name's Emily Madero. I'm the president and CEO of French Quarter Festivals, Inc. And we put on events here in New Orleans to drive economic opportunity and celebrate our culture, which we love so much. Monica was just talking about New Orleans food, and we certainly love the music as well. Before that, I was working for an organization focused on the startup community, and Alan is now a board member, so he can share his experiences with that. But the five of us, and now six of us, were connected in an experience 5 years ago or so, where we had the opportunity to get introduced to you. So my journey has taken me from economic development to arts and culture. I've always been involved in the nonprofit sector, and certainly doing that work in New Orleans. It's critical to be able to understand and put a racial lens of understanding to everything that we do. And I'm just thrilled to continue to be a part of this conversation. And we'll talk a little bit more about what CINO as a collective is, but that's who I am.
Thank you, Emily. Liza, you're up next in the grid.
It's really great to see your all's faces. So echoing Emily, thanks for inviting us today. We were, for those on the line, we were saying before this started, we're used to seeing Monica and Dina every other month or so. So this has been a long time. So it's great to see you all. My name is Liza Cowan. I am a fellow studying impact investing and stormwater finance here in New Orleans, and have been doing that for the past couple of years. But after spending more than a decade as a grant maker at various foundations, with the privilege of being able to invest in different nonprofits across the Gulf Coast and region, I came to this work actually a little bit later. I came to this collaboration a little bit later than my colleagues here, though I knew all of them, and I knew of their engagement in Forward Cities, which Emily mentioned, and their engagement in hosting the Racial Equity Institute. And I think I joined, initially I was observing from afar, and I joined initially just thinking that I could help them raise some, when they decided that it was time to raise some money and keep this going. I thought my background in grant making could, I wanted to help out with that, and certainly have become more deeply involved than I initially anticipated, and have been very grateful for the opportunity to work with them in this way.
Wow, thank you. And that background looks familiar. I think I've been in that living room there before, having some great food with you.
And, yep, we can host backyard gatherings again.
That's right. It was great. Alan, you're up next. Alan Square.
Hey, my name is Alan Square. I'm an entrepreneur here in New Orleans. We own two companies, a construction company with about 130 employees and a consulting company. We actively look for acquisitions to build on those two platforms. One of the things I'm most proud about that company, we are about 80% Black and brown people across our companies. And I'm Black, so Black owned. So that's a good thing. Dina used the term organizing, and I had no clue that's what we were doing, right? I thought we were analyzing data. You guys gave me, I'm an engineer by background, so you guys gave me some facts that I could use in conversations that I struggled with. And the light bulb went off when Barbara Major said, y'all were organizing and community work. I was like, nah, that's not what I do. I'm a capitalist. But it's absolutely been something that I've been happy to be a part of with this group. There's an amazing passion across this group and the work that we're doing here in New Orleans. And I think we're at this point at a crucible across this country and then locally. And it's a unique time. and it's a time that we can leverage, hopefully for good.
Thank you, Alan. Andrea?
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Chen, also in New Orleans. We work with social entrepreneurs. We're an incubator for small businesses and nonprofits, and we work in the areas of water, health, food, education, and community economic development. And it has been such an honor to have been part of this journey with the Racial Equity Institute and this organizing group. And I've taken my own organization on our own racial equity journey, and we continue along. It has just been wonderful to see people shift and change over the last couple of years. So thank you for helping us do that work.
Thank you, Andrea. And Kelly, we're asking you to introduce yourself, say something about the work that you do.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Solney. I'm the director of strategic partnerships for Camelback Ventures. We are an accelerator for entrepreneurs of color and women. We're based in New Orleans, but our fellowship is national, and we focus in the areas of conscious tech, education, and local economies. I joined CINO. I probably was the last person to join about 3 years ago. It's been an incredible journey. I've certainly drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak. I'm just happy to be a part of the conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. And last but not least, Sean Barney. You're on mute, darling.
I should know this by now.
I know, it never fails.
Thank you, Monica and Dina, and to you guys for having me personally. I'm Sean Barney. I'm a real estate developer in New Orleans. Spend time between New Orleans and Bentonville, Arkansas, but based in New Orleans. And we also do structured finance, which means, we help municipalities with their capital improvement plans by structuring their bond deals. So my background is really in real estate and finance, and kind of like Alan, I like to joke that I moonlight in the Save the World business, this racial equity stuff. But to echo the sentiments of all my colleagues, I'm eternally grateful to Dina and Monica because they really changed my life in introducing this framework to me. And really has allowed me to pull in, all my friends, my colleagues, my family. And I think the thing that unites our team in wanting to make New Orleans the most equitable city in America is that, we clearly understand that this work is required and what it needs to go into it. And I think that, what you guys give us, in addition to the facts, is you give us the hope that we can make a difference and change it. So for that, I'm grateful, very pleased to be invited into the conversation today. So thank you.
Thank you. Dina, I'll say this one thing and then throw it back to you again. I want to thank you, Sean, because actually the impetus for doing this series was that I'm just not how should I say, I'm a late bloomer when it comes to technology, right? So by the time I find out about stuff, everybody else is known for like a year or so. Those people that post those late notices of somebody's died or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it was when you guys started the Naked Lunch that I was like, wow, what would happen if we took that notion of, as you guys were talking with your New Orleanian family, that we could talk with our organizers across the country, because everywhere that we were presenting, people were saying, well, what are other people doing after the workshops? And as they're going through the workshop, how are people making this live in their towns and cities? And so we don't get to talk, you can't talk about that at great length in a session. So I would say that COVID-19 has given us all in this stay-at-home experience an opportunity to have captive audience and to share. So we are now talking as a part of this series with organizing groups, institutional or grassroots groups or whomever we're working with across the country, having them to share what they are doing as an impetus of motivation to others, how they can do it. So with that said, Dean, I wanted to make sure I thank Sean and the rest of CINO for inspiring us. So we got this mutual reciprocity of inspiration going.
That's right.
Yeah, I just want to say something, and just frame this, and then Monica, I think it's appropriate for you to ask the first question because I think
Sure.
you were there when they went
Okay.
on their journey first. But you know, what we have in our society are these sort of polarities. We have organizers and activists and advocates, and then we have, you know, our power brokers, you know, people who are representing positions inside of our systems and our institutions and doing their work their way. And you all are an anomaly, you know, you all are, you know, the kind of things that you do, you're like big people doing big things. I mean, you know, venture capitalists, access to capital, entrepreneurs, real estate and development, arts and culture, the nonprofit, you're doing amazing things. And you've integrated you've brought these two realities, these two experiences, these two challenges together. And we haven't seen that done before. I don't know if you know, I don't know if people in our nation know the model that you have set up, because you have done so much to leverage where you are to make something amazing start. You know, whether what's happening is part of the journey and the process, but you've started something that I think is so inspiring, amazing, and really, really powerful. And so, so all of what we're going to be doing in this conversation is you guys describing how in the world you got in this place. Because I've looked at I know you, I've heard your stories, and I've looked you up. I mean, you know, I've looked up, you know, Andrea and Propeller, these big giant grants that you've gotten from these amazing foundations to help nurture and support the work that you're doing with the entrepreneurs and startups. And, you know, Sean and Alan, you know, people who know you and know the work that you're doing. And Emily, I mean, you know, in New Orleans and managing festivals and arts. And so you all are, you know, leaders. You know, I've had the opportunity to, you know, to be a panel on some of the things that Kelly has organized and working with people, you know, trying to bring together, you know, sort of the sort of Black business environment and what's happening around that. So I'm just, you know, in awe of who you are and what you're doing. And I think, Monica, as you asked this first question, it's going to begin to tell the story of how you got here.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I want to do, because there is a story in that. And my experience when I'm in New Orleans, usually Sean, Andrea, someone tells that story. So I'm going to throw it to Sean and Andrea, but it's anybody's question. And that is how did we begin this journey? That where you are now as CINO, Campaign for an Equitable New Orleans, where'd that start? How'd that start? How did we get the assemblage of who you are now as that organization? Somebody want to tell that story? You're muted, Sean.
I'll give it to Andrea.
Okay.
Gosh. Okay. So it started, we were part of a group called Forward Together. Actually, I forget the name of it. Forward New Orleans, something like that.
Forward Cities.
Forward Cities.
Oh, that's what Forward Cities.
Obviously, that wasn't the most impactful part of the journey.
Right?
And so please, everyone chime in. So we went to Durham and we experienced REI. It was only for 3 hours. It's Monica and Bay. And we were blown away. It was the four of us, me, Emily, Alan, Sean. The four of us, we were blown away, and it felt like someone had lifted, at least for me, felt like someone had lifted the veil over my eyes, and all the things that were like, that didn't make sense, it all fell into place, and it's like we had a framework. And so it was powerful for all four of us, and we thought, wow, we've got to bring this back because we think this could be impactful. And then we were also thinking, what is our lane? Because we all had a different lane in New Orleans, but we had a lot of access collectively to decision makers in the city, and said, well, really the people who need to hear this are the people who don't have to hear it. So what can we do to make the people who don't have to hear it and then do something about it? Yeah, Sean, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I totally echo all of that. I think, you know, the analysis was clear to us that this thing was about power. And so, you know, there's certainly grassroots powers, but there's also systems leaders and influencer power. And that just happened to be the lane we all sort of travel in. And I think as Andrea said, we decided to use our power to, you know, be able to bring those folks into the conversation, really pressure them to come into the conversation and organize it in a way where in the beginning, you know, you sort of had to get people to come and use some personal credibility. But as this thing has grown over time, you know, you look like you're sort of an outsider if you have not come into the conversation about racial equity. And I like to say, I don't think you can lead an organization or a community without being steeped in racial equity. And I'll just add to Andrea's comments, somewhere along the way, we just decided to host, and then another group would say you have to do it again and again. And then somewhere along the way, we decided, we're going to get 1,000 leaders to come and participate in this. And then we decided, our objective, our reason for being, because we're not even a 501c3, we're just sort of a collective, crew, I guess, but was to make New Orleans the most equitable city in America. And we think that has economic currency as well as moral currency. And so, we committed ourselves to going on the journey and continuing, even when we did not know what the end goal was. And it eventually, revealed itself to us and how we, use the campaign as our structure.
That's great. And the only thing that I'll add to that is, certainly it's about power, and happened to be the environment that we were in was mostly business lane. But I think, I have to credit the framework and the groundwater analysis, because I think we knew right away that this needed to be addressed at the systems level leadership and across all systems. So not necessarily folks who are already committed to social justice, but permeating that mentality across all systems citywide.
So let me just say this, that's a start, that's an idea, that's an exposure, that was an entree. But how the hell do you come back to a city like New Orleans and then get this thing off the ground and get people coming and coming and coming, so that a few years later, they're still coming and they're committing, and they are spreading the word, and they're bringing others, and they're sending others. So who wants to tell us how a group makes that happen? That what magic is it? Or is it magic? Or is it just feet on the ground, boots on the ground work?
I'll jump in here if you guys okay with it. We weren't a formal organization. We were just some colleagues, some folk that knew each other from work. Sean and I actually go way back. We grew up in sister churches. We went to the same middle school. But we knew when we were bringing this back to New Orleans, we had some folk that were like-minded, right? And at some point, we had built some scale to where we could start to take political risk in pushing and prodding and really getting systems leaders to the table. We're fortunate enough to be in New Orleans, where a ton of civil rights work and equity work had been taking place for a very long time. And what it felt like is we were doing something different, because we focused on systems leaders and primarily educating white males, right, who tend to control many of the systems. And with that, we were able to build some scale around it. And as a loose group, there were times where leadership came from certain places, but I have to really pat, Sean on the back by being a visionary, by being risky. I mean, he's put his career on the line to challenge and prod and make people feel, and publicly shame them for not showing up and being present. And so I applaud that he has the ability to tell people what he really feels. And as Black people, we often are not, we're conditioned not to say what we really feel and be thoughtful about how not to let it come out. But he's able to do that in an eloquent and challenging way. And that's helped build what we've put together. And now, we're more of a organized group. Kelly's come on and really helped us, get our act together. But again, we're still pushing forward and don't necessarily know what the end goal is. And we just jumped off a call, and it took intentionality to get here. And all we know is that it's going to take a lot of intentionality to fix it. And so in this work, I don't know that there's an end in sight. And so we've just kind of been plotting forward without an end in sight.
I don't know if you all know your national footprint, as we are watching webinars and conferences and interviews and things, stories being covered across the country. I have seen people interviewed that I know are using language that they got in a workshop that you got people into. And it has been absolutely amazing to see your national reach. So as you talk about the change and the organizing and the influence that you have in New Orleans, I want you to know that what you're doing there in New Orleans has a national megaphone. And I am convinced that the topic of systemic racism that is now on the national stage is there because of our organizers. And you all, you know, as I hear you, Alan, I'm an unintentional organizer myself. You know, I wasn't what I did, but you all are doing what we also call institutional organizing. And that is you're taking sort of community-based approaches and you're bringing those inside of powerful places and spaces with powerful people and having those conversations. And it's so interesting that you all were not a group, you know, you were people that were, you know, that knew each other, and you have pulled yourselves together. You know, Kelly has, you know, built some infrastructure there so that this is running smoothly. And you're, you know, how are you managing the enormous things that you're doing in your own lives, your own work, your own vision and own interest, and dedicating so much time to, you know, educating, raising awareness, and moving forward around structural and systemic racism? Because people ask us the number one question after a workshop is, well, what do we do? And, you know, I don't know how long you guys asked that question, but it wasn't long because you started doing really quickly. So all of you, any of you can just start to talk about that process, and then, you know, we'll go from there.
Dina, I want to maybe bridge a little bit between the last conversation and this question, and then pass it to my colleagues, because I think to the question of what do you do, and as my colleagues described, it was like, well, let's have one workshop. Okay, we'll do another. You know, not really thinking how long this is going to go or what that impact is actually going to be. And I think one thing that what we do at the end of every workshop when folks ask us, okay, what do we do with this information? We say, go back and look at the institutions that you're a part of and start with the knowledge that you now have. Start to examine the policies and procedures and practices that you have in place through this lens of racial equity, and what can you do to change those things. And as you talked about our national reach, I was thinking one thing that we're seeing right now, and we'll see what the outcome is, but as the mayor has put together, as the governor has put together these kind of recovery commissions, we can count the alumni from our programs who are now sitting on these commissions that are making, so we're not telling them what to do. We don't have the policy solutions, though sometimes, as my colleagues will laugh at me, sometimes I wish that we did have just the prescription to hand. But we're hoping that folks are showing up in those spaces, asking different questions, and thinking about, as our elected officials are appointing people to these kinds of commissions, are they thinking about who has been through this? Our mayor, our city council, many of our state legislators from New Orleans have been through the 2-day workshop and have become part of this conversation in our alumni group. And so how, by being armed with some of the questions that they need to ask, we're hoping that helps change some of what we see going forward.
Thanks, Liza. Anybody else want to say anything about Sean?
Yeah, I would say, you know, for me personally, it is a passion, because I just hated my business partners, my wife, my friends, just sort of walking around ignorant. That's really where it started for me, because I didn't like that I was ignorant about a lot of this. And when you sort of talk about, you know, our society, I think what, again, makes me hopeful is also the same thing that makes me depressed a little bit about it, is that so many people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And, you know, once you bring them into the conversation, as you guys know, we ran a few minutes late because we had our virtual naked lunch right before this deal. And people have been coming back week after week after week for 8 weeks. You know, somebody texted, this is the highlight of my week. And I'm convinced that is not necessarily just, you know, for what we're doing, I think that people want to know what they don't know. And so for me, what keeps me going is I just know there's so many people, I meet new people all the time and they don't know. And so the first thing that's my icebreaker is to bring them into this conversation, because I know it will change them just as it changed, you know, all of us. And so in some ways, don't get me wrong, the work I think is challenging. It is hard. But then on the other hand, it is sort of easy to weave it through your life if you try, if you sort of lead with it. And you know, you don't have to be pushy on it, or I'm you know, I know Alan says I'm aggressive, and I am, but you know, you don't have to be preachy or anything like that. You know, we just ask people simply to commit the same thing that we do, which is time. We're not asking for your money. We're not asking for anything like that. We just ask you for the same thing that we ask everybody else for, and that's the time, and that's thanks to you guys. So in that way, I think it is easier than it looks, while at the same time being challenging. I like to say you have to sip and pour at the same time, and that's very hard to do. I've tried it. But yeah, that is sort of what this work to me is all about. And as you guys say, you know, you have to work on the fish while you're working on the lake. If you said, you know, nobody's telling you don't work on the fish, right? But somebody's got to pay attention to the lake and certainly to the groundwater.
Yeah, I was thinking, Sean, because when you said, you know, I didn't know this, and I'm like, how can you not know? You went to Howard, you know, your dad has was a distinguished leader in the Urban League. What do you mean you didn't know?
Yeah, man, I didn't know. You know, not, you know, again, not on the level. I think what the breakthrough for me really was just looking at it, not as what individuals you think of, you know, me or Alan or Andrea or Kelly, any of us really. It really is about the system, and that the system produces sort of those outcomes. And I think really the analysis of power and how power operates just really was a profound sort of, you know, breakthrough, you know, for me. Certainly some of the history I knew, but I really think it comes down to that definition of power. And it's funny, yeah. And my father was an influential person, and you know, but it was like a light bulb that's, you know, it's a bell you can't unring. So yeah, I didn't know. My kids will know. My kids will know.
Yeah. I think that's a mistake we make as Black people. You know, I'm Black, you know, went to an HBCU, African American Studies major, you know, belonged to this historically Black organization. And so sometimes we feel like that's the check. We checked all the boxes. And then we find out we know about some experiences, but we might not understand why we're having them or where they came from. So I appreciate your humbleness in that. Kelly?
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna say, to answer your original question about the balance of everything, I mean, we really take the stance that equity can't wait. So you make the time for the things that are your priorities.
Wow.
So you know, Sean and I have literally been on text conversations like 1 a.m. every night this week, getting ready for this lunch. And I'm not saying that that's the highlight, but we know it's necessary. And it's just like the best time we both have to get everything done. So it doesn't feel like I'm being, you know, tortured or by any way. I mean, it's all exciting work when you see the outcomes like we had at our lunch today. So, you know, for us, or for me rather, you know, it's about understanding that equity isn't secondary. And to your point, both of your points about, you know, one of the things that I think has been most transformative is how I can translate this work into just daily conversations with my Black friends and families, because I actually think that's where the contagion starts. And that's how you get to have like more productive conversations. I just kind of wanted to throw that in as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I feel like Oprah on Super Soul Sunday wanting to tweet, you know,
Right,
equity can't wait, and equity not secondary. I like that.
Right. Well, I want to jump in to say this. So Dina and Bay, myself, and other of our colleagues have been there with you guys in the training and have continued to be awed and inspired by the people that are coming in. Y'all brought in the institutional heads of colleges and universities, the CEOs of healthcare facilities and training facilities, the owners of big business and largest construction firms. But you've also brought in community people. You brought in folks who are part of also that struggle, who are down at the bottom of this, and who knows what it feels like to have institutions sitting on top of you. But Dina and I, in preparation for this, said that the one thing that has been consistent is that we've seen you guys all leverage your social capital. It's one of the reasons we had you introduce who you are and what you were doing even absent of this, is that what you've actually done is leverage that social capital into calling folks into that room. So somebody tells me, how do you do that? I mean, and I'm sure you've gotten some folks who slammed the phone or who said, no, I'm just not coming. But how do you do that? How do you make that happen? Anybody?
I mean, I would just, speaking to what Kelly said, we were all committed to this, right? And so the first thing that we all do, that question at the end of the first training, what do we do next? Well, go work on your own home, go work on your own social circles, go work on your board, your employees. And I think that was a commitment pretty early on, that we were just going to be unapologetic and tenacious. And you'll hear Sean talk about the arm twisting. It wasn't often asking once. There's some folks that were really eager for this and were hungry for this. And there are others that it took in a year and a half, because finally, a critical mass of their colleagues had gone through and were talking about how transformative it was. So they didn't have to take my word for it, or Sean's word for it, or Kelly's word for it. There was, I think, sort of a secondary layer of peer pressure. And I think that that's been something, as Alan said, that's been a little bit of a compounding effect that's been helpful.
Yeah, I would say that was one of our earliest tactics that we still employ, is that Sean might reach out, and then I will reach out as well, and I'll follow up, and then Emily will chime in, and then, wow, this CEO who knows all 5 of us or 6 of us, they're hearing and ask from all 6 of us. It's easy to say no to 1. It's harder to say no to 2. But when you have 6 people that you personally know, that's a lot harder. And what we've gotten better over time is then we've started engaging our alumni. So we're like, oh, we want this CEO to come. Hey, these 4 alumni, those are your friends that you go golfing with, go get them. And we might be the first one, and then we CC everybody, and then they chime in. So it's really a group effort, and it's a tactic, I think, that's been pretty effective.
And Andrea, once you also oh, go ahead, Emily.
I was going to say, I think we've always been strategic in terms of the folks that we wanted to bring to the room. And sometimes that has we've been strategic in getting to them. So bringing in husbands and wives, business partners, thinking about, what's the most effective way to get the right people in the room.
And I would
go ahead.
Add what you said, Andrea, to how you like to talk about what happens in the boardrooms, when you're working on something and, you look across the table and 3 or 4 people have been through, the CNO deal and they're allies, and that gives you a block to sort of, move action forward. I know you love talking about that.
Mm-hmm, I do. Also, I'll say that we're shameless about name dropping. We are so shameless. So if someone has come, we use their name. We say, this CEO has come, Walter Isaacson has come, and we list everyone who's a name in the invitation that we send. And we're like, these people spent 2 days with us. And so, I don't know, that it's pretty shameless.
It matters. Liza?
I think just one other piece on that is that it's Kelly said, this mission, we're trying to make New Orleans the most equitable city. So some of it too is I might see someone at a cocktail party and think, oh, wait a second, have they been through yet? Given their role or given their board engagement or given their interests, they really need to come. So I just keep a running list on my computer desktop, and I keep next to it the date that I send the invitation. And so some of these people, it's I've sent the invitation 5 different months in a row or over a year, and I just keep forwarding it to them. I know you said you had something with your daughter last time, but can you come this time? And just kind of keep up with, who are those folks who are in positions. We say that we want systems leaders. So we want the folks in our community who have the influence over decision-making, over hiring, over resource allocation, over policy, to come and be a part of this conversation, because we think that once they're a part of it, they can't help but think about how they can change what they're doing.
So how did you decide what you were going to do? And what did you do?
I'll take that one. You know, we sort of, it was a journey. Let me say this. I think it also helps, you know, we didn't design this sort of mosaic of a team to be, it just kind of came together. And I think that is, that is encouraging, because you get all kind of folks who want to do this type of work, and I think can be just as passionate and committed to it. I think that we really have internalized the notion of making our city a more equitable city, and really internalize the objective of being the most equitable city in America. And I'm with Alan. I don't necessarily see a goal. I don't necessarily see a finish line and we can all sort of take a deep breath and yay, we got to equity. I think it is you know, a way of living and approach to living. And so I think it is something that is, you know, a big problem, but I think a common sort of thread between us is that we're willing to work on big problems. And as you say, Dina, it's kind of like approaching the cure for cancer or whatnot, right? You go to the fun run, you wear the pink, you give money in October, you do all that, and we don't know when there'll ever be, you know, a cure. And so I think that has been, you know, our approach to it, is that, I'll speak for myself, I feel like I'd be derelict if I'm in these circles with folks and I did not bring them into, if I didn't use my power to bring them into the conversation. What's the purpose of having leverage or power if you're not going to use it? And so it just seems, you know, I would, you know, as Andrea said, shamelessness and inviting people, I would be ashamed if I did not. And so I think there's something about a personal commitment, a commitment you make to yourself, and then when you make it to each other. And, you know, as you know, we sit in on all the sessions that you guys, you know, do, and sort of, you know, take it as sort of a personal obligation to sort of see our people through, right? And sort of see them through on this journey. And what that has been, you know, helpful for us, right? However many times we've done it over more than 4 years with you guys, it's been a leadership development piece for us. And I think we really need leaders developed in racial equity. It's not a part-time thing. It's not something that you teach yourself or whatever. And I think that has also made us effective over time. As Alan said, it's given us the language to engage in our personal lives and our professional lives, but it has given us a language to go out to the community. And in turn, we've gotten a lot of credibility from the community. As Kelly will say, you know, people after this COVID thing sort of saying, well, what's CINO going to do? And, you know, we're like, you know, we're going to be at home like everybody else. And they said, you know, nope, not really. And we need you guys to, you know, think about something. And, you know, we came up with this virtual Naked Lunch series. So I think that's really what it's about, is that if you're committed to the work, if you're committed to the change, if you're committed to the process, there is no other alternative but to live it and breathe it. And just like you guys, you know, when you extended the invitation, you know, we pretty much said, you know, of course, like, you know, we don't have to know what this is about, because I think I have a debt to repay to you guys for that. And so I just think it's simply there's no other alternative but to lean in on it.
Dina, can I jump in and say something about their audacity? Because thank you, Sean. We didn't craft a question to talk about the audacity of this group in the boldness of kind of how you ask, how you engage, the shameless, as you say, name drop, all of that. But the other thing that has really awed me too, I've been doing this work for 30 years and we've worked with groups all across the United States. You know what impressed me about you all is that every training, there is at least 5 out of 6 of you there, and you are there for the most of the time, which means that if we've done 50 trainings in New Orleans, if we've done 60 trainings in New Orleans, you guys sit through them. And I have to punch that and ask you about that because, you know, and I'm not putting down on other groups because we're busy people. but you guys got to be busier than anybody I know. And yet you've carved out time to say, not only have I had the audacity to ask very important people to be here, or people period to be here, but you said we're gonna be with them through it. So maybe some more on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in as the person who misses the most trainings of the group. I my entire life made my living by analyzing data. And what I've learned from these trainings is people's stories are valid data points. And I've been able to integrate that in my thinking, how I move. And I'm absolutely fascinated by people's experiences. I'm no longer surprised anymore. Our country is very predictable over its history. We know what the outcomes look like. Sean earlier talked about the criminal justice event that we're having right now, the pandemic, which was a healthcare issue. And next is probably education as we try to put these kids back in school. We know what those outcomes will look like, and it's predictable. But by showing up to all these trainings, we learn every day. And that's why we're there. And you know, I travel quite a bit for work, but those 2 days, I look forward to it. I bring my 5-year-old with me. Well, now he's 6. He made 6 this week. We couldn't celebrate on Blackout Tuesday, so we celebrated a little bit on Wednesday. But that's why we're there.
I would just add, you know, absolutely, it's an enriching experience every single time. But I think also what Sean was saying is, you know, sometimes we've done a lot of arm twisting to get those folks in the room, and we commit to taking them through that journey too. And I think that helps to making it sticky, right? They don't parachute in for 2 days and then disappear. You know, we have an opportunity to engage them in terms of getting their thoughts, how they're going to bring this back to their home, to their community, to their institutions. And so I think that has also helped in well, what do you do next? And how do we keep the dialogue going? And how do we not have 1,000 individual alumni, but 1,000, you know, an alumni group and, you know, a movement and a cohort of folks that are connecting beyond the 2-day training.
And I'll just add to that, Emily, I hadn't thought about it until you said it, but we are, you know, again, we're not a 501c3, which we say all the time. We call ourselves a campaign for Equity New Orleans. We're building community. That's what we're trying to do here. And so I think as Sean and Emily said, you know, being there to be with the people that have come because we've asked them sometimes multiple times. They've come because they know us because of our social capital, but then also to get to know the other people that we don't know is another pleasure that I've had each of these times. But I think then the other piece of this too, in addition to extending my own learning, and I learn different things. You all present different things. You send in different facilitators. You bring new information in. I learn new things every time. I think it's also, and Andrea's often said this, so Andrea, I don't know if you want to go from this, but we're still learning how we have these conversations in our families, in our lives, with our colleagues, with others. And so I'm not only learning the facts and the data, I'm also hearing you all have conversations with different groups as different questions come up every time, and hopefully learning more how I talk about racial equity in my different circles that are outside of this.
Andrea,
I'll just chime in and just say, I echo everything everyone else has said. You know, I heard there was a quote the other day that I heard that says, "The beauty in education lies in the relationship lies in the relationship with the knowledge." And I think that even though, you know, like you guys have your presentations, which to Liza's point, it may change up a little bit, but it's pretty much the same. Like, I know the format, you know, what time you're going to talk about this, that, and the third. But it always feels like the class is new again because of the people. And I'm always interested in how you are going to respond, particularly Dina, Monica, and Bae, to some of, you know, the questions and or comments that come, because I think that's more so where my education comes in. So I can take that and carry that into other conversations. So that's always the fun part to me when I'm looking at it, like, oh, how is she gonna respond to that? And I always see how graceful, especially you guys are with it, is always just, you know, incredibly inspiring.
Well, trust us, we don't know how we're gonna respond.
Well, you know, what's interesting too is that, you know, part of this is you know, you have to be, you know, my line of work in real estate, I'm comfortable with risk and not necessarily uncertainty. But in this, you sort of have to lean into the uncertainty. Like, you know, we didn't know, it was not a campaign from the beginning, but we also knew that folks were going to plug into this and plug out. Some people would come to Naked Lunch. Some people would come sit in on a session another time. And so we really tried to build this in a way, if it is a lifelong journey, then people have to be able to go at different speeds. You know, I remember telling Emily, after we did the initial deal in Durham, I was like, man, I'm ready to go do race 3.0. And she's like, I'm on race 1.0, right? But she was down, right? We were down together. And so I think that is, you know, also been informative, is that people enter this at their own sort of kind of comfort level, still being uncomfortable. And so we designed the campaign in a way that people know we're going to be here. People know, like, of course, I'm sure you guys have been getting blown up over this last week or two, but so have we. You know, people are like, when are you doing a virtual groundwater? When are you doing a 2-day? I'm like, don't you know we're still in lockdown? People are like, you know, let's get on with this race and equity stuff. And so, you know, I think we built the CNO brand as one that is, you know, authentic and reliable, because we're going to show up. And so that means attending the sessions, but people have sort of come to, you know, to think that we're going to do these sessions. And so I think that predictability is I think very helpful for folks, in that we're kind of going to figure it out together. And as you know, we built in Naked Lunches. We did a race around New Orleans to have everybody in New Orleans talking about racing. So as we've gone along, to Alan's point, we sort of built out 12 months of racial equity, and that has to do with the 2-day, that has to do with the groundwater, that has to do with the New Orleans groundwater, that has to do with the race around, it has to do with these virtual, I mean, so we want you talking race and equity. It's kind of like the inverse of Black History Month, right? That's February. Race and equity is 12 months out of the year for people to be able to plug in and take action. And as you know, we have people do an action pledge, and, you know, that's sometimes hit or miss, but it is about that infrastructure to allow people to get in consistently on this whole deal.
Yeah, you know, we have a very fragile memory and understanding of how change has happened in this country. And people have an idea, they have a picture, their optics about, you know, sort of who makes things happen. And, you know, while we can definitely see, you know, people who have been so hard hit, you know, people who are just dealing with every inequity in every system all day, every day. We also talk about movement-minded people, you know, aren't necessarily people who are just having a certain experience. And so this sort of movement-mindedness, I think you all possess, that led to the creation of something that, you know, the work that you do, the skills and the insights and the expertise that you have, and the other work that you do, you brought into this. You know, we say that racial equity isn't a 2-day workshop. It is who you become. It's how you live your life. And I think you all, you know, just model that, you know, as a group in ways that we haven't seen other places. And so this leads to this amazing initiative called CNO, Campaign for an Equitable New Orleans. And, you know, what have you been able to do? So how has this campaign work? What are some of the things that are happening because of that? This is forever work. You know, I don't even want to call it a journey. It's a process. And so it is work that we will be doing until it's gone, until we don't need to do it anymore. So I know you're not attached to the outcome and sitting there and and you know, having these unrealistic expectations. But you know, so CINO is your campaign, and what are some, because there's some things that have happened. You know, systems are stubborn, they're complex, they're hierarchical, and they're designed to keep doing what they do. And so the sort of concrete systemic change that we'll see, you know, is coming. But along the way, there's some things that have to occur to create an environment under which that deeper systems change can happen. So can you all talk about some of the things that are changing? You know, just people having the conversations. I have heard people who I have been one of the trainers in one of your sessions. I have heard them on the national stage using language they got in that workshop. You know, and so you are providing a resource and support for all of the stakeholders, all of the leadership, all of the organizers, to have some common language so that we can frame this correctly. So can you talk a little bit about what's happening, some of the things that you're doing now that, you know, people don't know about?
I'll give a couple, and then, you know, it looked like Liza was going to chime in, but I think the one thing that is important, and I've heard this multiple times, is that we built a community where people go to a cocktail party and they're standing next to each other at the bar, and they kind of, their eyes meet, and they're kind of like, did you get to racial? And they have, and people have told me that on, you know, multiple occasions, but, you know, intangibly, and you know, folks came out of it and they created a cash bail fund as part of their action pledge. You know, a university president came and said, you know, every student who comes to university will take a racial equity course before they, you know, graduate. It's maybe a good segue to Andrea. Andrea basically changed the mission of Propeller to center, you know, racial equity in how they engage the companies that they work with. But the interesting thing, and, you know, maybe Andrea, you should chime in, but the interesting thing I would sort of say, Dina, is that we have been so relentless on getting people through the front door. A lot of times we find out what people are doing just because you run into them and they tell you how they've transformed their own organization, or they have organized, right? And some of the synagogues around town have started their own series. The Center for Healing over at Xavier, Justice and Healing, that came out of Ann McCall, who's the provost at Xavier, who that was her action pledge, is that we're going to stand up this center over at Xavier to do this work and be rooted in our community. That was her action pledge. So it's hard to keep track of, but you know, but people are out there doing it. But Andrea, I don't know if you want to chime in with your stuff.
Sure. I think, as I mentioned earlier, like I personally, and for our organization, we've been on our own racial equity journey, and we are so far from getting to the end of it, but we've put in all different kinds of things, from instituting you know, racial competencies for all staff as part of performance management, organizational equity audits, retention plans, changing our hiring practices, changing the makeup of our entrepreneurs that we serve, just a lot of, you know, diversifying our board. So a lot of different actions over time, and there is still so much more to do. And I think that a lot of institutional leaders have, you know, come through the training and said, okay, I can start doing some of that too, because that is one lane that they can leverage their influence.
I think the one thing I'll add is, you know, oftentimes folks will come to us for the answers, and something that I think, you know, Sean and Liza have been really great at is delegating that back to the work, back to the group, right? So we're not going to do the work for you, but we're going to invite you to do the work. And so creating industry sector sort of focus groups, essentially. I don't know if you want to talk about some of the subcommittees and what they've been doing, but, you know, we asked them, would you commit to leading a small group over the course of the year? Just meet 3 times. There's no expectation, but the hope was that with some of the folks that were coming through in the healthcare sector, or some of the folks in hospitality, that they could start to make network connections that could be helpful in moving the needles in those systems.
So I want to step it up a bit and ask maybe what could be perceived as a tough question. Maybe it's not so tough, but there are those who would say, then you guys don't sound like the grassroots group, right? that you're coming from another place, and that's a question that's out there. I see one in the chat that's not quite that, but kind of is similar to that. But what does that speak to you? Any critique that may come that, well, you know, at the level of the least of these are those most marginalized, how might making, okay, because you say you want to create a more equitable New Orleans, what does that mean? The connecting of the marginalized and the grassroots to all of you in your own way, you might agree, in some capacity, you're kind of out in the business professional world. So what does this mean to folks who aren't where you are?
Yeah, I think I'll jump in here. I think part of this is the beauty of the campaign, right? And this kind of goes a little bit back to the first question. The beauty of the campaign is, and the only thing I think that we were strategic and intentional about was educating systems leaders, right? Folk who had power. And I think Sean might have said it on this panel, or maybe it was the previous panel today, but the only way you bring about change is with real power. And so my mom is an organizer. She's a preacher. She's a historian, archivist on Black history. And she's the community that's fighting, right? And so if you view this analogy of the grassroots is coming underneath, right? And working that way, I would argue that we're approaching it from this way, trying to meet you in the same place and leveraging our networks, the success that we've been able to build in our careers to have this network that permeates all of these organizations and all of these industry verticals or these system verticals that need change, I think works. I think it works well. I think what we're seeing in the protests around the country, that the show of force of people coming together to protest against things, that brings about change as well. And I think one of the things that and it took us a long time to get here in New Orleans, and you all were at the table with us, helping us try to figure it out, is what's our place when you think about the grassroots organizations in New Orleans who've been doing this work a lot longer than we had. We had to be respectful. We had to make sure that we understand and be sensitive to the work that they've been doing. And we don't come at it as experts at all. I think this is a learning journey for each of us. And I think we've carved out our place, and over time, the groups have realized that there's room for all of this work. Nobody has to own it. And I would argue that we need a lot more people, a lot more educated people. I think Bay said we don't have any rich activists, right? we need folk, we need our best and brightest working on this. And so I think we've carved out our space, and people are being respectful of that.
I just want to echo what Alan said of kind of carving out our space. One thing Sean said years ago that's always stuck with me is some of the folks we get in the room are the folks who have the privilege of not thinking about this if they don't want to. And I would count myself in that number, that I certainly could go through my life and not think about it. And so that, I think out of respect for, there are so many, New Orleans is a city that is rich in community organizing and so I think even, you know, as we joke that we're community organizers, sometimes I think, gosh, no, we're not. Like there just are so many powerful faith-based groups and neighborhood groups and grassroots groups. But I think what we have been able to do, as we talked about before, by leveraging our personal capital and networks and relationships, is get folks in the room who have the privilege of not thinking about this if they don't want to, and recognizing that that's a way we can contribute and that's our lane, is I think a big part of what we're able to do.
And if you think about it through just the business prism, we just looked at who is the market that was unserved. I mean, we just kind of saw an unserved market. Maybe that's we're all kind of business people, even though we reach out beyond that group, but it was an unserved market. And I think, you know, I tell folks, I've been doing this effort with these folks longer than it took me to get my MBA, longer than it took me to get my undergrad degree at this point, just about. So I will have been educated in this longer than my Howard and Tulane education. And I think that's something that's sort of, kind of interesting. I would never profess to have a degree in racial equity or anything like that, but I respect what you guys do because you're professionals, and we need more professionals in it. And but at the same time, I've taken what I've gotten through you guys and through our experience with CINO, and I think people respect our expertise, respect my expertise in engaging in the conversation. And so we need more of that. It's definitely an ongoing learning journey, but I uplift that. Cost me a lot of money to go to Howard and Tulane, but
Say this though, I don't think we just look for the person with the biggest title. I actually think that we've gotten better at that even over the past 3 years since I've been with CINO. We look for the people with the influence, and that might be a neighborhood influencer and so forth. So I do want to just put that out there as well, that it's not just the biggest title. It's more about who we think, and we've gotten better at asking, like, why should this person be in the room when we take referrals. So I will also throw that in for good measure.
Yeah, I think I appreciate, I know our participants as they're weighing in, the texting me and the chat and the questions that people are asking is that strategy is so important. I think this is what happens when, when we're trying to move something, an agenda, an issue, we're trying to address something that usually what's lacking is a strategy, because sometimes we see strategy as a tool of the wicked institution. And so we have to have a plan and a strategy as well, to confront this, sort of hierarchical complex arrangement. And so one of the questions that people asked was, how do you bring, those different sectors in the room? How do you bring, you've talked about where you're positioned, and being able to bring sort of what people would call high profile people, your university presidents, your corporate CEOs, your civic leaders, people who are running the city leadership initiative or the downtown development corporation or all of those things. How do you bring the activist grassroots community in that's, not part of that population? Because you do that very effectively. And that's also been part of your strategy and approach. So one, why do you bring, these sort of, mixed, groups together? And then how do you do it? So why do you do it and how do you do
I'll take it. I think, that was also a struggle, at first we thought about, do you get all the education folks in a room, right? Or do you get all the, what is it, Alan, the business council folks together, or do you get all the health people? And our concern, and we debated that a good little bit because that's how they would approach it. Somebody texted Emily and I 2 days ago and said, I'd like to get all my legislative colleagues to come to the groundwater. When are y'all doing the next one? And the challenge with that is that, people then will sort of see, well, if we just get the education thing right, we'll fix this whole problem. Or if people just earn more, it's really a class kind of thing. And so we thought that it would sort of obscure to some extent the analysis if people sort of brought just only their own expertise. It's probably not totally accurate. But the other thing is that, and I've learned this from being on boards many, many years ago, is that leaders like to be around other leaders. And so that was sort of a selling point to bring in people who might run a museum to be, in the room with the head of a bank, to be there with the head of the teachers union. And to really have the space to grapple with sort of a very tough problem that, if they talk about it in any other place, and all the lights are on them. And, I've certainly had people I invite who say, well, I don't want to speak. I just, and I say, I don't want you to speak. I just, I want you just to sort of come and sort of sit there. And so, in just the way I approach it, I think that is also another sort of big, selling point. And kind of going to Alan's, point about the grassroots or whatever. I think we, if that is not our natural lane. So I think this is also about credibility. So if I'm in a meeting with the guy about a project, it's very easy for me to sort of say to him across the table, hey man, why don't you come to this deal next month? I think you'd get something out of it. So I think we work our lane very effectively. I think there is something to be said about curating it across different industries. I tell you, in Northwest Arkansas, we had the police chief from Fayetteville, and I think maybe Monica, you did that session, perhaps, or maybe it was Bay, and I'm not sure. But anyway, they had protests the other day, and he's getting lauded for how he handled the protests. And what he has said to me is, you know, I credit a lot of that to coming to the race and equity deal, because he said most of the time we're in spaces where it's only about law enforcement being the problem. What he appreciated was, you know, he looked around the room that he was in, and it was health, it was philanthropy. He's like, this is a problem for everybody. It's not just law enforcement, right? You see the manifestations when a person like Mr. Floyd dies, but it is the through line of everything. And so I think it's easier to see that, frankly, when you're sitting with other people across other sectors who are struggling and grappling with this same systemic issue. It is sort of clarifying, and I think people recognize it and appreciate, you know, being in a room to tackle a tough problem with other people.
Dina, I want to see if I can. Well, I want to ask another question, but I do want to. We intentionally set this for the time we did to give at least some time to the Q&A, the questions that have come to participants who have sat with us and listened. But this is called Beyond This Moment. That's the title of this series for us, because in conversation with Dina and others in REI, you know, it's that, so we are home, we were stuck. And the question was, how do we create the work? How do we also watch a nation and a world in transition? We are all, I think, acutely aware now that we're just not going back to life as it was, no matter what we might want or whatever, but we're in consideration of that. What is the beyond for Sino? You're doing Naked Lunch, which is awesome, that you're having conversations about things that matter in this time that people can, but we had a pandemic, and we had a whole lot of folk that seemingly were surprised by the disparities of outcomes from who got it to who died from it. And little did we know on the heels of that would come, I have never seen the uproar in this country with racism as the banner ever in my life. And so Dina and I will be asking every group, what does the future of the work that you're doing, how has it now been either elevated, punctuated, or lifted up by two concurrent crises in this world? Not all at one time.
I'll take a quick first stab. We released in a press release maybe 2 weeks ago what we think are 6 powerful guidelines, but simple. We didn't do a booklet. It's not a report. It's basically 6 guidelines that we released and directed to the press and to the folks on these task force that Liza mentioned. The guidelines, which we're happy to share, are very simple. They really center Blackness. And, you know, as Kelly said to me the other day, you know, this moment can't just be about working on white people. It has to be about uplifting Black people. And, you know, Black people are protesting certainly this man's murder, but we also, you know, protesting 3/5 outcomes that Black folks get and wanting 5/5. We want whole outcomes. You know, we want our full citizenship. And so, you know, that is one thing we did. And we also did this series to raise our hand and tell people we're still here. Racism is still here. Structural inequity is still here. And so are we. And so that was our way of doing that. And as you know, they have been very well received, and we've covered a lot of different territory. But the objective is not so much the virtual Naked Lunch series. It really was to give us space to figure out how do we pivot out of this and really fight for an equitable recovery, or as Kelly says, a recovery to equity, because we never had full equity, right? So How do we use that? And what I would say to you, Monica, is we're still figuring it out. And I think we're going to say next week in our Naked Lunch, where hopefully the mayor joins us. I think we're going to try and chart that course out next week, and we're still figuring it out. But I would say to you, and this comes from Kelly sort of saying, at some point you gotta campaign on it. We have to get out there and hit the streets and campaign for equity in 5/5 and an equitable city. And we're very fortunate that we have a base of 1,200 leaders who are powerful and run large systems that, for the majority, are in line with this and sort of, are waiting for us to lead. That's been the challenge, right? Is they sort of come back to us to sort of lead it. And so we do these lunches. So I don't know what the other team will say. I think we're still sort of figuring it out. And technically we have until next week to sort of figure that out. That's when we sort of said we were going to wrap up this part of the series. But I think it is really campaigning to run an awareness campaign about race and racial equity and the guidelines that we put out there. In today's call, we said, sign on to the CINO guidelines and be our partners in it. Stand next to CINO, ACLU, Vera, LSU Medical School, all the folks and the organizations that have come. Now is your moment to sort of say, we believe that a recovery in this moment, whether it's criminal justice or health, is really all about centering the outcomes for Black people. That's what I would say.
So we have a couple of questions after Liza. We have a couple of questions we want to ask you all, so we want to get as much of them answered. People have a lot of questions about what you're doing. And Liza?
Well, and I saw a couple of questions come in, so I was just going to add on what Sean said about the Naked Lunches and alumni engagement. And so I think, again, this has been an organic kind of thing since we started of, okay, well, we're hosting one, let's get some more people in the room, we'll host another. Okay, now we'll plan out a year. Now we're going to add the groundwater sessions so that the managers who come through and call us up and say, can I send my 20-person team? And we say, well, no, you can't send your 20-person team to a 2-day because we want to have this cross-sector engagement, but we'll host these 3-hour groundwater sessions. So we've just sort of slowly started adding things. And the Naked Lunches came about as an opportunity to then bring the folks from different cohorts together and the alumni from our 2 days together. And we moved them online, as Sean said, over the past 8 weeks, now that we're all home. But before that, they were all in person. And sometimes we'd have speakers. Sometimes it would just be a chance for folks to get together and talk. And I had one other, which I've forgotten, but that was on the alumni engagement and the Naked Lunch. Oh, and the other point, I think, in the beyond this, in your comments, Monica, of what's next, and to Kelly's point of recovery to equity, what we learned from you all and from the 2-day workshop is that often inequity is exacerbated after things like, through the Great Depression, through even the 2009 Stimulus Act, because we weren't intentional about the policies we were putting in place. And I think we all watched that play out, certainly in the first round of the Paycheck Protection Program, as we saw that go out this. And so I think part of what we're challenging our alumni to do, part of what we need to figure out is how are we intentional about equity in the recovery from COVID in this moment? How do we think about, and what's our role as voters, as systems leaders, as activists, as others, to, as Sean said, center equity, center Black communities, recognize that this is another one of those moments where if we're unintentional, if we're not purposeful, then we will see we will likely see, if history as our guide, even a further widening of racial inequity.
Dina, I think Wanda is with us. You guys see her in the corner, at least the panelists do. And she's been monitoring our chat along with a couple of other Black Pearl members. So what we want to do is to make sure that our folks who have have journeyed through this moment with us can feel as though some of their questions are directed and responded to. So Wanda's going to bring some of those to us.
So hello everyone. There's a popular question about churches. And so the first question is, and I'll combine the two of them, how can we have these conversations in the church? The other is the church at the table during these strategy sessions? Are they on the ground? How are they collectively involved?
I'll take a first crack at it. You know, when we first set this up, we were very intentional about excluding two groups, and that was elected officials and clergy, because those are the folks who typically get into the conversations about race and equity. And then over time, we found a way to substantially integrate the faith community into the conversation. Certainly we had just very recently the auxiliary archbishop of the New Orleans Archdiocese was in the room. We've had folks from 2 or 3 of our largest synagogues who participated in the conversation. Alan, help me out. I know, Pastor Square has been there. So over time we have, but we try to make sure that everybody still is integrated into the broader, group, that it's not just the clergy folks over here. It's not the education folks over here. It is everybody in it together, because again, there's racism in the church. And so, we feel like a holistic approach has been the way to tackle it.
I will say, though, to add on to what Sean was saying, is that we've heard stories of the clergy who have come, like give sermons or give addresses to their congregations, and heard back from folks, and they've then connected with other churches or other synagogues, and so it seems like there is quite a lot of energy in the with like religious institutions too. I'm not sure how much of that is due to us, but I know many of the folks that participate in those church organizing groups have come through.
We can go to the next question.
The next most popular topic, of course, has been your naked lunches. And so one question is, can they join even if they're out of state? And how can they get more information if so?
You shake your head, Alan.
Right now, we only have one more left, but yes, I got to join. And I guess the best way is if you go to our website, equityfornola.com, and just subscribe to the newsletter or the email blast. You'll get an invite for it.
Sounds good.
Just one of the things I'll just add about the naked lunches is we've had some that were open to the public, but I think today's lunch was only alumni. And we've used these lunches as a way to bring alumni back together, for folk to find out and catch up with each other on the work that they're doing. We try to bring topics of immediate concern, like what's happening in the country right now. And so we've leveraged them in that way. But typically, if somebody wants to come to our naked lunch and they're local, you got to come to our 2-day first.
Okay.
And we try not to be gatekeepers, but it's been a good way to get them into the room.
Right.
Another question has been, can you share some of the examples of changes you've seen in your community as a result of your work?
I think Andrea mentioned some personally of what was going on. And Andrea, somebody did ask for you to repeat your list of examples of what your organization was doing or any other organizations were doing. They said they caught the organizational equity audit. I know you've shared that in the chat.
Sure. Okay, so some ideas. Yes, equity audit also, and that comprises a lot of different things. Looking at your HR practices, not just hiring, but also retention, and then being able to disaggregate all of your data by race and gender. So including compensation to see, are you paying, are there disparities in who's getting paid the most in the organization? Also kind of your employee engagement survey, disaggregating that by race and seeing like, are all your white employees feeling happy and all of your Black employees not, right? Like it's hard to identify what those like specific things are within your own institutions if you're not measuring that. And then that's just kind of like on the HR side. For us, kind of like performance management is a big piece of it. So, and professional development. So like every person on staff is required to have kind of like, you know, we have a racial equity competency framework. And as part of your job description and your performance, you are measured on how you do on racial equity competencies. And it's part of your professional development plan. You're gonna have to, starting next month, you're gonna have to report out on your progress on your own personal racial equity competencies on a monthly basis. So those are just some examples. I could go on and on.
The other thing I'll just add, and I think Sean mentioned these earlier, but we were going quickly, but in terms of changes or outcomes in the community, there is a community funded bail fund, and really as a tool to undermine money bail, and as a stepping stone in that direction that came out of this. Also, I think he mentioned that Tulane University has implemented a racial equity requirement for all students to go through and participate in a class. So those are sort of just examples of concrete things that have come out of the work that the alumni are doing.
I'll add one more because I think for folks on the phone, like this is maybe smaller, you know, it's not university wide or dismantling money bail, but one small business owner moved some of their accounts to Liberty Bank, to a Black owned bank. So just the kind of learning in the 2-day and then investing in our community in a Black owned bank from, you know, whatever other bank they had a relationship with.
Yeah, I'll give another example. So United Way made a requirement of doing the organizational equity audit that I just sent out of all of their grantees. And it was part of their matrix of how they scored your application for funding was on whether you had taken the organizational racial equity audit.
One other thing, I'm sorry, Dina, if you don't mind, I saw another question come in the chat of kind of measuring outcomes. So I come from a background in philanthropy. All these folks are entrepreneurs. I sort of come from and sometimes have the tension with this of like, yes, how do you measure outcomes? What's our theory of change? How are we thinking about all of this? And one thing that's been powerful for me is from the groundwater that REI does, showing the disparities across systems and then showing that as an area under the curve. And I'm assuming most of the folks on this call have seen that, the area under the curve of white advantage. And when I think about our work, you know, over time, it's about shrinking that area under the curve. We want to see that white advantage lessens. If we're making New Orleans the most equitable city, that lessens over time. We don't necessarily have a way to measure that, you know, certainly from a month to month standpoint or year to year. But I think all of these stories, if the United Way is doing this, if small businesses are doing this, if the library is doing this, if the court system's doing this, our assumption is that over time, that area under the curve will get smaller.
So we have, Alan, we have somebody that is calling in that can't type a question, so we're going to let them talk after you. And then we really want you to, you know, one of the questions earlier was, have you issued this challenge to other cities? And so I know you're working on New Orleans becoming that the most equitable city. And maybe you're not ready to challenge people yet. You don't want anybody to get ahead of you, but I think you guys have a big head start. So I don't know if you want to issue the challenge just yet, but maybe you can talk about that. So Alan?
Yeah, no, I'll just go back to Andrew, who was talking about how this all got started. Forward Cities was a collaboration between Cleveland, Durham, Detroit, and New Orleans. And all these cities had just come through some economic shock. Ours was a natural disaster at the time. Detroit was just the economy had tanked on them. And we were all dealing with rapid gentrification and trying to figure out how do you stave off some of the bad outcomes of that. And coming out of that work, when we were introduced to you guys in Durham, Cleveland and New Orleans really issued that challenge to all 4 cities, right? Like who can be the most equitable city? And Cleveland's been doing their thing. It's been a while since we've checked in with Durham. I know there was some good stuff going on there, but so that challenge is out there, and we'd love to, when you have a challenge, you learn from each other, right? And we should all be stealing. I mean, I'm a former Bain consultant. Consulting is all about studying best practices. What did they do? How did they do it? Let's do it here, right? That's really what consulting work is. And so in this work, hopefully there's no pride in authorship, at least not for me. Anything that we're doing, you can have. But in just going back to the data question, and Liza, you framed it well, but it's important because we often want to look like, and I've got an argument happening over here on this computer. Somebody just talked about, yeah, I got 2 women in these leadership positions in my company, and somebody's challenging them about how many people of color they have hired, right? And how we set goals and what we tend to monitor and track tend to be these indicators of progress. And we really need to focus on the data that we showed you that showed that we had a problem. These gaps in education, these gaps in the criminal justice system, it's these real outcomes that we got to focus on, and not become weak because we don't see the needle moving quickly. We got to keep working, right? To make these gaps that all have a name to be shrunk and eliminated.
So let me see if I can get Claire on here. Claire, if you can hear, you can ask your question.
And it'll be the one that'll close us out, as a matter of fact.
I think I accidentally touched the thing. I don't have a specific question, but I am just loving hearing what you guys are doing. And I have a whole page of notes of things I'm gonna, as it were, steal from you. We're gonna share with ours, but somebody else should get the last question. Thank you, Dina. My error.
Thank you.
So Dina, since it's 2:59, well, Amy apparently popped up. Is that a question, Amy?
Okay.
So, yeah, we're at time, and we want to respect. I know that Dina, I've got some private texts from people saying they needed to sign off because they had other commitments. But thank you for all of you that have hung in there, and I hope you see what we see. We've been absolutely amazed, inspired, encouraged by this work of Sino, and the audacity of this group of folk to believe that they can create an equitable city, and we believe it. And I like a lot of what we've heard, that they understand there's no end game. There's an end game with no end line, maybe is the way that I'll say it. And so there is a goal. But I do want to remind folks that this was the 4th in the investment of this Beyond This Moment series. We are here every Thursday at 1:30. As a matter of fact, our guest on next week will be a slew of educators and community organizers from Palm Beach County, Florida. Dr. Deborah Robinson, Barbara Cheeves, Keith, is it Oswald, Dina? Keith Oswald, and there's another Artur. No. I'm sorry. It is not Florida next week. It's Indianapolis. My mistake. We have a team coming from Indianapolis. Dr. Patricia Payne, Pat Payne, Andrew Strope, Arturo Rodriguez, Anne Marie Byers, and I think it's Tawana. I think her last name may be Davis. And they're going to be with us talking about how a school has taken on this racially equitable work, and how they are ambitioning to believe that they can be one of the first districts in the state of Indiana to create equity within their school district. And so I invite you. There has been a persistent question, people asking us about how can people access the recordings we have recorded. I am going to make a promise, and then you guys get to hold me to it. And if I don't meet it, I don't know how you're going to punish me, but sure you'll come up with something. But we're trying to get these, all of these recordings up on the Black Pearls website and on the REI website. our goal was to have gone live. Count it to me. I know nothing about technology, and it didn't work today. So, but we promised to have these on websites, and they will be available to folks to view and visit there. And I'm just asking you, if you will, not only to come back next Thursday, but please, by all means, spread the word. So let's see, Liza and Kelly and Andrea and Alan and Sean and Emily, thank you guys from the bottom of my heart, Dina's heart, REI's heart. Thank you, because this is the work, and you guys carry this work, and we so appreciate it. Dina, anything?
No, thank you.
See
Thanks, guys.
y'all. Stay safe out there.